right, let's call this meeting to order, huh? I can't remember when we started an executive session.
Yeah.
Have we, we've always sort of started, I guess from the days and just walked out the back door. It feels a little weird to be like in the final meeting spot, but.
Well, we're not.
We're not.
Yeah, we are. Final meeting spot? Yeah, this is where we're gonna be.
Okay.
Right.
Final meeting spot, right?
All right, Rosa, would you call the roll?
Mayor Burnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski,
Here.
Commissioner Del Mar,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully,
Here.
Commissioner Dell.
Here.
Okay, this is the August 20th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting, and we are starting in council chamber. We're going to move to executive session. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C3 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in this act, as including a vacancy in a public office when the public body is given power to appoint under law or ordinance, or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office when the public body is given power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. We will move to executive session and reconvene here in about an hour and a half.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
Very author, isn't it?
Really did.
Commissioner Tully has a quiz afterwards, like Bart Simpson on the blackboard. We'll expect that written several times. Thank you all for your patience. I know we're a little late getting going tonight. And as I mentioned last week, and I'll mention again tonight, please exercise continued patience as we sort through the operation of this new room. It's a great room. It's going to serve us all, I think, really, really well. But there are logistical things we're still sorting through what's the most comfortable, efficient, and easy manner. So you should have had an opportunity to see the agenda, certainly beforehand. There are copies on that countertop over there. We are now at item 5 on that printed agenda, the minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion concerning previous minutes?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the August 13, 2024 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments from the council on those minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 6, the public comments portion of our meeting. I think most of you have been to these meetings before. This is the portion of the meeting where we take comment on items not on tonight's agenda. There will be opportunities, as there always are, when we get to either active or first reading agenda items for additional comment. With this arrangement that we have tonight, if you have something to comment on that is not on tonight's agenda, please come up to this podium and let us know what's on your mind.
This is nice. You guys did good. The comments I'm going to make tonight are the same comments I made to the library board meeting about a month ago. And it's in regards to the library, and I know they're separate from you and all of that kind of stuff, so I don't want to open that up. But what I want to do is talk about the needs of individuals in Downers Grove and how their needs are not necessarily being met. So for example, today when I was driving to my home, I went down Saratoga Avenue. You've got the food pantry over there. There were lines of people waiting to get food. They were outside of the building on the sidewalk. This is a situation that occurred 6 weeks ago approximately at Jewel. And the police was called, and it was in regards to a young woman, and I'll talk about her in a little while. But she came into Jewel yelling, "Help me." That's all she kept on saying. Therefore, you guys have an audit trail because the police was called. The police, I assume, did some kind of an intervention. I'm not asking that we violate the confidentiality of this person, but it demonstrates that there is a significant lack And I would like to ask that this woman or someone like her become the poster child of what it is that we're talking about, both at the library and what I've been saying. So tonight I'm going to describe a situation that occurred at Jewel on Ogden approximately 6 weeks ago. I would ask that you reflect upon your reactions to this lady. The 20-something woman was yelling in Jewel, "Help me." This is all she kept on saying over and over again. The police were called and she was escorted outside, where she was greeted with 3 squad cars with their lights blinking, uniformed officers, an ambulance, and a fire truck. All the lights were blinking. What was this woman seeking help for? Was it for a mental health issue? Was it for substance abuse? Was it for domestic violence? Was it help for her child? Was it help for housing? We won't know the answer to the questions, but what we do know is that she had no place to turn. We've been discussing the need for a social worker at the library for some time, and that's become a controversial issue, as most things are. Would this woman have been welcomed at the library had there been a social worker there, or would we say that she was disruptive to the library environment? As the director of a mental health center, my programs were mandated to respond to the needs of this person. The structure was also somewhat different because our community mental health centers in Cook County were community-based. So the center was actually located in the community, and the dividing lines were populations of approximately 100,000. And I worked in Austin for 15 years as the director of outpatient mental health. And because Austin has a population of 100,000, we were the mental health center, and we were mandated to provide the services to the community. What we would have done is we would have defined what services she needs, and so that she did not fall between the cracks in the social service delivery systems, I would have assigned a case manager to her. She has the right to refuse services, etc., which is her right, but a case manager would have been able to monitor her to make sure that she was linked appropriately with services. But in Downers Grove, where would this lady go? I therefore make the following recommendations to the council, and I also made it to the library board. The first thing, because the library has been talking about it, is that they approve the hiring of a social worker and evaluate the scope of services that the social worker will provide. This has been related to discussions at the library about the social service delivery lack in the Downers Grove community. They've documented all the services, including individual services, outreach, case management, funding, housing, etc. Also, as a taxpayer living in this community, what I'd like to suggest is that we form a coalition as a Downers Grove community and work with other communities to obtain services for an individual such as she. And this would mean reaching out perhaps to Westmont, because in Westmont, DuPage County has a clinic there. And if we could get those services expanded so that they could do outreach, case management, and so forth to serve the Downers Grove community, that would be approximately a population of, say, 75,000 people, which would be the model that we had in Cook County. With this coalition, we could then meet with the DuPage County Health Department to obtain services in Downers Grove and surrounding communities. Since we are considering a social worker for the library, there was a sign that I came across on the back of a Pace bus recently that said, if you need substance abuse services in Will County, contact the Will County Health Department. In DuPage, I have learned through reliable resources that DuPage recently turned down an offer for substance abuse services by Haymarket House and Gateway Foundation. In addition, the DuPage County Health Department does not provide family therapy. Therefore, interventions to children and adolescents are severely limited. Affordable housing is also lacking in our community. Lastly, rather than fighting about whether or not this should occur and what the ramifications are, the people who are standing in the food pantry line, this lady that we have a police history of now, does exist. And the issue that confronts the community is that we give due respect to individuals like this and really consider what it is that we can do to reach out and to help. And my closing comment would be that a lot of the issues that are confronting this lady or others that were in the line for the food pantry could also be confronting us in the future. Thank you.
Good evening. Eileen Brenner, I'm a resident. I'd like to know why the residents aren't seeing any of the discussion about the library board appointments. Clarissa Doherty's term is up this month, and there's no public forum, there's no public discussion. Why are the discussions in private? We, the public, would like to hear the discussions. We heard no public discussion on the appointment of Matt Topic to the library board. How'd the votes go? Do I have to FOIA to find out how the votes went? I think this should be a little more transparent, unless there's some privacy issues that I'm unaware of. But I'd like to see this an open discussion for everyone to see and hear and see the votes. I don't understand why it's all in private. Thank you.
I wanted, Cora Negracco, 39 years in business here in Downers Grove and property owner. I wanted to bring something up that happened at the end of the meeting, Mayor. I went over the meeting that we had last time. I think you misunderstood what myself and two other people said about 5 years old being surveyed. I think it's great to get their opinions, but I don't think their opinions should have been counted, and that's what question I was asking. Are they counted in the Guiding Downers Grove survey that you were doing? When I suggested a water park and when I suggested a park to include children, handicapped children, my suggestions were written on the same type of paper and put on the sticky board that these young children's opinions were given. And that's my question. I seem you either misunderstood it or intentionally misunderstood it, because at the end of the meeting you decided to reprimand the three of us that were speaking about it, and we did not get a chance to respond. So I didn't want to take up my 5 minutes on that. I'll move on. Right now we have outdoor dining. Outdoor dining in the summertime is working fine. I think you guys need to go around like I do since June 16th and look at all these restaurants that are empty outdoors, even at 7:30 at night. In order to spend all this money, I think there should be some justification for the taxpayers. So once again, I'm just gonna suggest, take how much money they're bringing in on taxes on their liquor and their food between the 3 busiest months in the wintertime, November, December, and January, and then take June, July, and August. And let's see, is it double, is it triple, is it quadruple of what they're bringing in? It makes no sense to lose all this parking without having any accommodations or some parking, without having any accommodations to replace that parking. It makes no sense when this is the Midwest and we have not just snow and cold weather, we have humidity, we have rain, and people don't want to sit outside there. It's obvious when you go and look. We also have the parking issue, which I brought up at the meeting many times. And once again, you can do other things. You can close off from Burlington to Maple on Main Street during the summertime for the evenings on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Have bands out there. I suggested different areas where it would be favorable at one end and on the other. You don't have to take out more bonds, $60 million for this, $1 million for consultants. Take out more bonds. You want to say that the taxes haven't gone up in Downers Grove, but the rest of the taxes have gone up. Wouldn't it be great if we could not just keep them the same but lower them? Just like now we're going to have to worry about that in 2026, we're not going to get that percentage of food grocery tax back, and you want to re-implement it again. Wouldn't it be great if we could say, hey, listen, go grocery shopping here in Downers Grove, because guess what? You pay less taxes on your groceries here. It's very easy to spend other people's money. And I just think that an investment of taking away the parking, making the sidewalks bigger, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Something is going to happen, and then all you're counting on is all these restaurants that they need to have people to come outside of Downers Grove in order for them to make a profit. Day after day after day, it can't just be the residents that can walk from Downers Grove to these restaurants that are going to keep them afloat. And as we get more and more restaurants in here, you're going to need people to come from Hinsdale and Woodridge and Lisle and Lombard. And if they can't park anywhere, what is going to happen? They're going to go, well, I'm not going to Downers. I'm going to go to Oak Brook because there's all these restaurants. There's parking by all the restaurants, and I can go there. I'm going to go to Naperville. They have a section in Naperville. They have 1 million restaurants, and you can park by the restaurants and go. You know, maybe move those over to 75th, do something to build up something else, or you want to revamp Fairview, work on doing that. And keep outdoor dining in the summer, but to have all that sidewalk and that wasted space, you're not going to be putting the snow there, which I already suggested. You know, you take up parking spaces because we have nowhere for the snow to go. So just maybe push this off and don't make your final decisions. Let's think about it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll try and see what happens. David Rose. Unlike VC, the council, I was not impressed by the draft sustainability existing conditions report. I found it an uneven hodgepodge of topics and treatments. One section that did provide some somewhat useful information was the one on greenhouse gas emissions. The report focuses on what it calls direct emissions, but unfortunately, as it's typical, disregards the so-called indirect emissions, those attributable to activity underpinning all the product and services going in and out of Downers Grove that make its way of living possible. Setting aside that issue, I want to illustrate by focusing on direct emissions why I continue to contend the village is not serious about its goal. At the end of July, consultants led residents in 3 visioning sessions. According to their comments to this council, the sessions were going to be fun events. Fun these days being a way to try to generate citizen participation because fulfilling one's civic responsibility falls far short as a motivator. Apparently fun in this case wasn't much of a motivator either. I did not attend any of the sessions, but I'll speculate as follows. I contend if Downers Grove were serious about sustainability, the visioning sessions would have included the following exercises. 1, the UN stated in 2023 that CO2 emissions need to be cut in half by the year 2030 and to net zero by 2050. GRC protocol members endorsed reducing emissions to 50% of 2005's level by 2030 and by 80% by 2050. What does the way of life in Downers Grove look like with its direct emissions cut to meet these targets? Asked differently, but more easily monitored by residents, what does Downers Grove way of life look like with its total fossil fuel sourced energy reduced by 50% by 2030 and 80% by 2050? Two, when the single greatest contribution everyone can make to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other resources is not to have children, what policies should Downers Grove consider to encourage a family to have no more than 2 children? What size population should Downers Grove have in 2050? What policies should council consider to reach this target? Fun questions, right? Didn't happen, did it? Just as well, since I suspect residents are as unprepared and ill-equipped to think about such matters as is this council. Tragic irony, of course, is that councils have made the task of reducing emissions to the degree required much more difficult. During the post-war period, including the past 25 years, councils approved significant increases to the residential, retail, and commercial space, along with the associated increases in population and vehicles and vehicle miles traveled, both direct and indirect. Most recent increases were done in an explicit effort to keep property taxes as low as possible in the face of needing to pay for long deferred maintenance and other expenses. None of the so-called development, public or private, has ever been done with a concern about its impact on emissions or any other aspect of the more properly phrased ecological sustainability of the village. And realize greenhouse gas emissions is just one in the set of planetary boundaries we're crossing. Crossing means don't just say, oops, sorry, and get an undo or a redo. As the draft report implies, we prefer to believe we just will somehow adapt when the time comes. What somehow means in practice is another topic, however, we don't want to think about, let alone prepare for. Why can't we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and avoid crossing other planetary boundaries? Because humans, especially the well-to-do and rich ones like the residents of Downers Grove, refuse to reduce the level of their usage of non-renewable resources, most notably their reliance on energy slaves, the machines that make modern life in rich nations possible in the relentless pursuit of economic growth. Like the slaveholders of the Old South, we literally can't imagine life without our energy slaves. Not surprisingly, the draft report makes no mention of either crossing planetary boundaries or levels of consumption of non-renewable resources. Also worth noting is that the GRC Compact does not include among its members the municipalities of Northwest Indiana, towns which are in fact an integral part of the Chicago area economy in terms of both labor and product. The omission is particularly noteworthy because life in the Chicago area literally stops dead in its tracks without the products coming out of the BP oil refinery in Whiting. Excluding Northwestern Indiana's emissions in determining the region-wide total pushes them into the indirect category in which they are conveniently ignored in striving for the big 50% reduction. The shift to lighter modes of transport for short-distance travel, such as we see happening at Downers Grove, hints at an increasing awareness of trying to lower emissions. But that shift is negligible compared to what needs to be done. Either the pet and bike plan or the sustainability plan processes try to collect data indicating residents' willingness or ability to reduce GHG emissions. Of course, when few people in the rich world are serious about ecological sustainability, it's hardly surprising Downers Grove, with its civic and cultural preference to stay well behind the curve, isn't serious either. As the planning process now underway affirms, taking the goal seriously in Downers Grove is clearly going to require much more than adding a new staff person and hiring some consultants, especially when those hired are themselves lacking in understanding. As I keep saying, people are concerned about the environment, just not all that much.
Anyone else? All right, one thing just for a matter of clarity, votes on appointments happen in public at this dais, or that dais usually. They don't happen, we don't take any votes in executive session. That's a matter of both law and practice. So just to be clear, I don't know what people are expecting. Executive session has a host of reasons why it can be entered into. We have chosen to do that on time and again, here and there. We will still make such decisions internally amongst ourselves, but no votes are being taken there. Votes are being taken here. If you want to know who voted on the last library board trustee, just look at the minutes of the meeting he was voted in, you'll see. All right, item 7, consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We do not have any first reading items tonight, so we have a couple of active agenda items. Is there a motion concerning historic landmark designation?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt a resolution granting historic landmark designation for 4812 Northcott Avenue as presented.
Second.
Any audience comments or questions on this item? Council comments or questions? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Spadowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. Passes unanimously. We have a little document to present. Some people want to come receive this? Glad you could be here tonight. Where did Doug go? So we still haven't figured this out.
Yeah.
I think we need to switch sides. You guys want to come over here?
Stand up by the desk.
Yeah, I'd go
Stand by the dais.
Go by the desk.
Yeah, because then you
Just
can.
stand by the desk, Mayor.
Yeah.
It's a better background, Mayor.
It's a better background. Let's do that. Let's walk to the back.
Okay.
Chiefs.
Come on, Bill.
This meeting, everybody's trying to figure out where to sit.
Where to go?
Everybody else gets the dais.
Just get down or go over the background there. It's nice.
That's much better.
Okay. It's always kind of a fun thing to do, and you know, I'll belabor the point just because we're here tonight. It's a program. If anybody's watching for the first time or seeing that presentation for the first time, it's a program worth checking into. There's a lot of information on our website about it. Village folks, people from the Historical Society, Pierce Downer Heritage Alliance, there are quite a few people who would be willing to jump in and help if it was something of interest to you. So please take a couple minutes, and if you've got an older or more unique home that you want to help preserve in our community, please take a look at that. Is there a motion concerning the Plan Commission and ZBA?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the municipal code concerning the Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals as presented.
Second.
Any audience comments or questions on this item? Council comments or questions? Chris?
Yeah, I certainly intend to support this. I just didn't know if there was any further appetite to discuss members having some sort of professional expertise as we do on the building commission.
I can tell you my 2 cents on that is that we haven't felt that was helpful or necessary to either of these two boards when they stood independently. So it seems like maybe a broader board and commission question as opposed to one specific or unique to these boards right now. That's my thought on it. Anyone else?
Yeah, it does, I think it is maybe a broader discussion. I mean, it's good for that, like, are there other commissions that maybe we want to look at that way too? So I'd rather stay consistent with what we've done, but maybe for future days, have further discussion.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Greg?
I mean, lawyers always make a great fit.
Good joke.
We are the butt of many jokes, but I think there's some benefit to having at least a handful of folks on a commission or a board that have, relevant experience. But it's not always something that's necessary. I mean, I look back at my beginning on the Environmental Concerns Commission. I've never considered myself the greenest person in the world, but I was able to contribute and we came up with a couple of ideas that kind of worked for a little while before they fizzled out. But I think you don't need necessarily a degree in something in order to give good input, ask the right questions, and reach a good decision.
We do have precedent though, right? So our Historic Preservation Design
Yeah.
Commission requires architects
Yes.
as well as.
Yeah, there is precedent.
Right, so,
Right.
so, in that, I think that was the idea, is
Yeah.
that should there be a requirement that, that there be one or two or three
Right.
members with, that's, and so I'm hearing a request to ask for a discussion about that, date to be determined.
Sure. I'm just throwing my 2 cents out there since I wasn't here for last week's discussion.
I'll just add that it's a fair question because there are a minority of boards that's been the case. But for the majority, that has never been the case. It's been more in the selection process than a mandatory requirement. It's more the mayor and the council look for a balance because you not only want people that are in that profession, but you also want people who aren't in that profession. So we've traditionally looked at it from more of a selection process. Let's achieve a balance. I think that also opens it up to more people who want to participate than once you have slots, because then you're necessarily limiting the people that can apply. I know that sometimes we struggled actually with filling the slots for the board that you mentioned for that very reason. And the question was that wise after all? But I think it's something that we should go back and look at. What has the history been? What has worked? What hasn't worked? I think it's a fair discussion, but it should be across all boards and commissions. And we could all come up with extreme examples such as, well, I enjoy a glass of wine from time to time, so I should be on the liquor commission. Or it was mentioned earlier that somebody should have a library science degree if they're going to be on the library board. And I don't think we necessarily want to do that, but I think there have been some like pension boards or a financial background, because it's a very focused, specialized board, if that makes sense. Because of the requirements of the historic preservation and the meeting the architectural significance criteria, you would want somebody who actually understood architecture. So I think there's a case for it. But I agree. I think it's probably a fair question for a broader discussion, bringing in everything and where it makes sense, where it might not, and where it's worked and where it hasn't worked. But it's a fair question.
The only Board of Appeals we also had a requirement there.
Because it was very code specific and
code
is
specific.
required, or like, right. And there used to be other boards which were focused on electrical issues. You had to be an electrician. That makes sense.
I think it's definitely worth a discussion.
Maybe understanding where some of the challenges or the differences, where the council has, looked to the plan commission and maybe not seen feedback that we thought was in line with how things should be decided, and if having professionals on those boards would help that. And certainly my thought was not a majority, a handful. And now that we're combining two boards, is that an even more important thing to consider? So I appreciate the council's willingness to have that discussion at a later date. Thank you.
Any other comments? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Burnett?
Aye. That passes unanimously. That's the end of our active agenda. We're on to the mayor's report. The only thing I have is just a little bit of a related thing. Board and commissions are typically trying to sort those out in the month of August, which we are now more than halfway through. In all honesty, I was dragging my feet a little bit to see where this landed. So I'll be doing as we have done in the past and sort of handing out some possible candidate lists, assignments, and we'll try and get through that just as quickly as we can. But for the public who might be wondering, that's where that situation stands. Council member reports. It's an opportunity for council members to report out on what they're up to, other goings on in the community, other entities or events or organizations they think should be highlighted. We'll start with Commissioner Glover. Yeah, Danny.
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Leslie.
Nope. Again, we have our upcoming Grove Foundation golf outing on Saturday, September 7th. It is selling out quickly, so make sure you get your foursome in. And we have some pretty excellent premium raffle prizes, including a couple exclusive, there's feedback here, a couple exclusive foursomes at some nice golf clubs. So just make sure you go check out thegrovefoundation.org. The is important, otherwise it goes to a different organization, as I said last week. Also, I just wanted to mention that the Downers Grove Public Library Foundation is going to be hosting a conversation with Dr. Dieter Grun from the Manhattan Project. He was also a longtime Downers Grove Public Library president. It's a very, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, but I'm not. It should be a really great conversation. It's going to be moderated by local newspaper folks, Bob Rakow, and it should just be really informative and probably the last time you're going to get to hear that kind of a conversation in our lifetime. So just want to put that out there. That's all I have.
Thank you. Chris?
At the risk of causing some dogs to bark, no report. I'll keep it quiet. Thanks.
Greg?
I'd just like to add on to the Grove Foundation piece. Those nice golf courses include Rich Harvest Farms, which if you've never been out there is quite the place to play. So get those premium raffle tickets while you can. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mike?
No report, thank you, Mayor.
Martin?
Ditto. Thank you, Mayor.
Item 11 is our manager's report. My understanding tonight is it's going to be Stan is going to handle that for us, our community development director, and we're going to be talking guiding DG.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate everybody's patience tonight as we get set up here. As you mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit of guiding DG. We have Marisa with all together here to talk about our engagement through today. And then we have Aaron Tooley as well here from Baxter Movement to talk about our bike and ped progress that we've had. So first off, what I'd like to start off with is our schedule here, just so sort of show everybody where we are here in the month of August. As the mayor said, we're closing in on the end of August here. So tonight we'll be talking about a bike and ped plan, the conditions assessment, and then also talk about our workshop that we held last week with the community and with the TAP Commission. We're working on visioning with our comprehensive plan. Oscar from House of Levine here as well tonight to help us out with any questions we might have. Downtown and Fairview focus area streetscapes, we're doing the prototypes and some improvement mapping, and so that will be coming shortly to the Village Council. And then with our environmental sustainability plan, our team is working on a report outline. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks that we're excited to be presenting to you guys in September. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Marisa Schultz, who's with All Together, who'll be doing a presentation on engagement up to this point. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Hi, all. It's good to see you again. All right, so we have been doing lots of engagement. I'm going to give you a brief overview tonight on what we've been up to, how we've marketed, which is extremely important, how we've engaged, a lot of different formats, who we've heard from, and then some overarching engagement themes. You have all read the existing conditions memorandums, but these are cross-cutting of all of the themes that we've heard from engagement today. And then we'll briefly touch on next steps for engagement. So, to kick things off, and we talked about this in our first meeting together, it's extremely important for people in the community to understand that these plans were going on. In order to get them to engage, they had to know how to engage. And so we have been working with your phenomenal communication staff on getting the word out from the very beginning. This started in March, leading up to our in-person kickoff celebration. And like engagement, we know that people hear about what's going on in the community in very different ways. Some lean more into social media, so we've worked with your comm staff on getting the word out through social platforms. Facebook, you have a very strong following. Nextdoor, also lots of information that is gleaned through Nextdoor. And then X, formerly known as Twitter. And there are e-news weekly blasts and print that we've also leaned into. So we've had a lot of postcards that have been distributed at our events and through staff, flyering that we've done throughout the community, the Downers Grove magazine, which was released in July, August, and then Inside DG newsletter, which is March and June. And we know that these channels are getting a lot of eyeballs on them, right? So we have some of the, how many were delivered in terms of newsletters, the distribution rates, and the different impressions and reaches that we get through social media. And so like marketing, people engage in very different ways. And so we crafted our engagement plan and have implemented that through both a digital and an in-person approach. Digitally, we've had a survey that was very well received. And there was the main track that was the community survey, and then a couple of different tracks if people were interested and wanted to contribute more. And we structured this knowing that you had the threshold of about 10 to 15 minutes of people's time. And we definitely wanted to make sure that they were responding to this community survey, which included general questions for the comprehensive plan, but then also other questions that the sub-consultants on the team noted. These are, we need to know, and we need to have answers to. So at the risk of not making it too long and cumbersome, we did this community survey with the two tracks. And I think that we had some great reception around the way that was structured. We also have the Guiding DG website, which is kind of the main hub or the platform. So when we are out at pop-ups, we are giving out postcards, and people are being directed through this website. And then, of course, the MAP Social, which the survey was a little bit more general, and the MAP Social allowed for more place-specific feedback. So how have we done thus far, knowing that we're still within the engagement process? Early on, we set metrics, and we worked with both staff and the entire team. So their knowledge of the community, what different metrics that they have found have been appropriate through their work in other communities. And a couple that I'd like to highlight here, project website views. So we know that we're doing our job getting the word out. We had a target of around 5,000 to 7,000 views over the course of the project. And currently, or as we pulled this presentation, we were at 7,200. For survey responses, we aim for 900 to 1,000. Again, we worked on that metric with staff, understanding what your typical survey response rate was in the past, knowing that we were going to be marketing this more, and that there have been a lot of surveys out there, so there was a little bit of survey fatigue. With that metric, we hit 2,099 total surveys. For the community survey, we had 1,292 responses, 225 for the business survey, and then 585 for Bike Ped. And this is something that I wanted to highlight as well. We have seen this. This is not a Downers Grove issue. It is an issue with all communities everywhere, and that those that respond to surveys tend to be more affluent, they tend to be older, and they tend to be whiter. And that's what we found with the survey responses here. So you'll see that 71% of the community survey respondents, they've lived in Downers Grove for over 10 years. 11% were younger than 35, although you have 41% of your residents that are actually under 31. 93% of the community survey respondents identified as white. And then 36% of the business survey respondents were members of the business community. I'll note that there was a lower response rate from the business community at first, and we worked with staff and the other members of the team to do some direct outreach and make sure that business owners and their employees were in fact taking the survey. And that boosted that business survey response rate. So knowing that we tend to err towards kind of, a certain demographic or types of demographic for surveys, we knew that it was really important to get out there and do in-person outreach. So we did a lot of focus groups and stakeholder interviews. Those tend to be by invitation, where the team and staff had a lot of conversations. We had some staff-led community meetings. Your staff has been phenomenal. Of any community that I've ever worked in, they are at every single one of the meetings. They are at our multiple pop-ups and answering questions and very involved in the process. So you should be very impressed. We had DIY kits that staff could distribute so that members of the community could get a kit and organize conversations, some public meetings and presentations, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit, open house and workshops, and then to date, 6 community pop-ups that were geographically dispersed throughout the community. And I'll talk to you a little bit about each of those now. So we kicked off in April. We had the kickoff celebration at the Lincoln Center, where we had at least 250 people participate. So it was an awesome kickoff. We had different stations for each of the plans. It was very interactive and engaging. We had lots of families, a kids table, a wishing tree, and then we did a series of existing conditions pop-ups. So we were at Prentice Creek and McCullum Park. We had an ice cream truck that drew over around 250, 260 people. And we know that because of the touch points. So we had boards there where people could tell us what they love about Downers Grove and what they would want to see Downers Grove be like in 2040, what they wanted it to be known for. We also did a pop-up at the Rotary Grove Fest, June 22nd. So you see some of these images from pop-ups here. We had a series of visioning workshops, 4 different ones throughout the community that happened in late July, staff-led one in early August. So you see here some images from the visioning workshops. This is where people delved into what we heard from the existing conditions and started a transition in what they would like to see in there. And then we had another round of pop-ups that accompanied those visioning workshops. So we were at the downtown market, the summer concert pop-up, and then we just finished up today, while I'm a little sunburned, from the back to school bash pop-up. So in-person engagement numbers. We targeted 65 individuals to participate in focus groups and stakeholders, and we were right there. We talked to 66 different individuals. We had around 350, and I want to note that this was 350 throughout the course of the project. And we still have some pop-ups and some open houses to do. And we've engaged at least 345 people. We did not have a metric for pop-ups. That's really hard to kind of guesstimate how many people we're going to get to. I would say that after today, we talked to at least a good 85, 90 people at the back to school bash. So we're around between 500 and 600 people that have engaged in some way with the pop-ups. They visited our booth, they participated in the boards, and given us their feedback. And we've diversified who we've talked to through these pop-ups. So at our second pop-up, we started to note ages. We had people, if they were to participate, they would also put a dot on age ranges that they self-identified. So with these pop-ups, we had over 60% that were under 18. And you'll remember that from the surveys that we were really low in youth participation. These pop-ups include some that are young families and elementary school students, but there have been many that are in their teens and are high schoolers. I talked to a number today that have also contributed. And the pop-ups have drawn a more diverse crowd. We were at Prentice Creek. Today, we talked to a lot of members of the community, many BIPOC residents who are participating in these pop-ups. And because of the events, I want to note that a large share of participants were families. So, where are we with all of this? I want to bring up something that was noted about how are you sifting through all this engagement? Does my, as an adult, contribution and what I have suggested, how does that stack up to some of the others, especially if you have a lot of youth and younger elementary age kids? It is not always a one-to-one. We have had hundreds of voices participate and multiple opportunities. And so with SETS, very experienced staff, and our team, our job is to sift through all of those data points. So we have a lot that's pulled from the survey, but we also have some more of the qualitative that were notes on the boards that emerged from the conversations and the stakeholder discussions that we have, all of which are noted. And we have started to really sift through all of this and understand what are those themes that are bubbling to the top. So if there's something that you noted that's really important, that is documented, and we're starting to understand, okay, what from the overall community are the most important items? Where are some of the items that we have consensus, others that we may not? What are those, diversity of opinions and thoughts? And so for the sake of today, and to keep this shorter, we have summarized everything that we've heard, and we've organized it into 5 buckets. This draws on the takeaways from those existing conditions memos, from the survey results, from the conversations and the stakeholder interviews that we've had, and also all of the pop-up and events, number of boards, and different exercises people have been able to contribute their feedback to. And these 5 themes are housing for all, keep it local, more ways to move, green spaces and people places, and welcome to DG. And I'm going to talk through them quickly here. So housing for all. While many participants felt that the character of residential areas and the quality of housing are amenities for the community, the majority indicated a need for housing of all types. Affordable, senior, young professionals, new families. Many expressed a desire to preserve the historic character of the community and limit high-rise buildings in favor of moderate density developments, particularly in transitioning areas from single-family homes. Number 2, keep it local. The community highlighted the importance of promoting mixed-use development to improve walkability and neighborhood vitality. They indicated a desire to improve retail spaces and both retain existing businesses while attracting new businesses, especially those that will result in new jobs. Many acknowledged that while anchor stores are needed for downtown, local vendors are preferred over chains. Number 3, more ways to move. In addition to improving traffic flow and reducing congestion, community members emphasized the need for enhanced bike, pedestrian, and transit infrastructure to improve safety and connectivity in Downers Grove. Suggestions include creating car-friendly bike lanes separated from main roads, multi-use paths to avoid congestion, a centralized trail system connecting all parks, enhanced public transit amenities, and pedestrian-friendly zones in key areas. Number 4, green spaces and people places. Community members emphasized the need for sustainable practices, green infrastructure, and tree preservation. This included solar projects, increasing the number of electric vehicle charging stations, preserving green space near residential areas, more recycling options, stormwater management, and community education on sustainability efforts. Participants envisioned a future where well-maintained, biodiverse green spaces become a defining feature of the community. And finally, welcome to DG. Many residents mentioned the importance of creating an inclusive community for residents of all ages and backgrounds. There was a desire for Downers Grove to become more diverse in age, race, income, and business type. Participants suggested more investment in affordable housing, transportation, senior services, local businesses, and cultural public art components. One other thing that I'd like to add to this, which was the theme that bubbled to the top, was also celebrating the identity of Downers Grove through a lot of the streetscape improvements that we're going to be having. So with that, I'll pause, I'll take any questions that you have on anything I presented, and then Stan can talk about next steps for engagement. Any questions?
So, reactions, questions, comments. We're sort of at a check-in point. This isn't an evening where we walk away with a report of some kind or an action plan. You got any thoughts on anything you want to throw into the mix for both tonight and then it might frame or affect future conversations? Chris?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. The website views, sorry, you're in my space a little bit with this.
I think it's great.
Yeah, are those unique views or were those just total views?
Those were unique views.
Unique views?
Yes.
Good answer. The next question I have, thank you. You outlined, I think clearly that there are a lot of different inputs into this analysis or this sort of that drive these themes. Can you talk a little bit about how you weight those?
Yeah, sure. So I think part of it was, an important piece of it was the survey, right? So noting different, first of all, we had a breakdown of all survey results that we'd be happy to share with you. And I think some in the existing conditions memo that you saw. For a lot of those memos, I do want to note, though, that there was significant engagement that happened after those were submitted, right? We've done the visioning workshops. There was a lot of exercise and I think data that came from that, and also the pop-ups. So what we did is, first of all, we went through the survey results, but then we also started to annotate themes. So for the pop-ups, when things were written down, such as parks, right, or sustainability, specific geographic areas, all of those were noted and then counted so that we could start to analyze what are the themes that are repetitive and coming to the top. So part of that, very much quantitative. The other part was qualitative, deferring to people who were, the consultants and the staff who were having a lot of these discussions and saying, okay, what are you hearing? What is bubbling to the top of those? So this is really our effort of trying to balance all of that and look across the arc of engagement and what were those major themes and things that were coming to the top, which will still continue to be explored as we do more engagement and really delve into some of the policies.
Super helpful. The last question is this in any particular order?
It is not.
Okay.
No.
So it isn't like Housing for All was a theme that was more prevalent than Keep It Local?
It is not, no.
These are just sort of the 5 things that you pulled from the data and
the long list, right, of different themes. And I think this was also an attempt to kind of create these umbrella catchments
Sure.
for all of the data that's nestled below it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I have kind of a follow-up on that. So knowing, I love the fact that we've been able to boil it down to kind of 5 engagement themes. I guess my next question is, and it's kind of a loaded question, right? Like, how are we going to be using this moving forward in terms of how we balance the interests in here? So, as we've talked about through this process, knowing that our comprehensive plan is probably going to be at times contradict with sustainability and sometimes contradict with the bike and ped plan, kind of thinking about, I can see the Housing for All moving away from the dense developments, meaning we'd have less space for green spaces and people places. So are we going to be using it or kind of look, I know there was no real weighting in terms of which one was kind of a higher priority, but how are we then going to organize this so we can kind of start to get into the nitty-gritty of the details for our purposes?
I think that's a really good question. So for all together, our role is saying, okay, we're going to summarize, we're going to look across all of the different engagement pieces and above all the plans. And we are going to present to you some of these major themes, some of which may contradict each other a little bit. And we see these as being kind of like, guiding their references. So as the teams start to work on the comprehensive plan, continue their work on bike ped, of which you're going to hear from Baxter Woodman later, they're referencing these and deciding how they are incorporated and using them kind of as a checklist, making sure that the public and the engagement synopsis, what they've heard, is represented in those policies moving forward.
I will also add, I hope I'm not speaking on behalf of Oscar and his team at House Seal Levine, but we had that same question at the staff meeting prepping for this discussion. Doesn't necessarily mean that you will see exactly these things when visioning and goals and that kind of stuff is presented by House Seal in a few weeks. But we think there'll be a high correlation, and then it'll be up to the council to start making sense of that and applying the decision making. Did I get that right, Oscar?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Go ahead. I think it's just pick up on Leslie's last question there, because I think it's important to understand that these are exactly what it says at the top. These are themes. What was on people's minds when they responded to the survey, and the specific, and it's very high level. It's very, I'll say it again, it's thematic. It's sort of like you can say, I prefer science fiction over rom-coms. I have that, but then it depends on the movie. A lot of these things, someone would say, yes, this is on my mind, but then when you start talking about the specifics, which is where the rubber hits the road with us, is then all of a sudden you start to get a little different views. Well, I mean, yes, that's important, but I want to see it this way as opposed to that way, and maybe I do want to make a trade-off here and there. But I think it's important to see these themes, because I can imagine, going back 15 years ago when there were people, when the one of the themes was, we need a more vibrant downtown. Now we have a vibrant downtown, so the themes have shifted a little bit. We don't want it to be too vibrant. We don't want to have this, and we don't have that. But I think it's important to remember that these are themes and frames of reference for the next work, and I'm almost wanting the airplane analogy that we use, because this is up here.
Sure is.
And then as you get lower and lower, it gets clearer and clearer, but also gets harder and harder. Because that's exactly where you have to start balancing these things, and what someone thought they saw from 70,000 feet, now that they're at 15,000 feet. Well, I mean, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about this. And, but it's important. I like these frames of reference because they help us. It's like the difference between a mission statement and a high priority action item.
Completely. Thank you for that. And I think that you're right. Where these themes are kind of align with where we are in the process.
Right.
We're starting to get more into the details. More engagement will come around that, which will be tricky, right? We'll be having
Yes, and I think it's important.
more specific conversations
Yes.
around what does this mean and how is this actually implemented. So
Right.
along with council guidance, we'll get there. But this serves as that frame of reference.
Yes, I think it's important for the council, but it's also important for the public, because they're high-level themes, and we have to start working through engagement with residents to really translate what these themes mean in practical reality, both today and in the future.
Just want to pick up on underscoring that high-level themes, because what's also embedded in here is a ton of conflict. This is a little bit, it's thematic in that it tells us what's on folks' minds and where their priorities are, but it also is a ton of conflict embedded in all this. And that's going to be part of our challenge, is what does that really mean as we're trying to create long-term planning documents. This is not 30,000 feet, this is kind of 50,000 feet. And that's one of the challenges we always face, right, is this is an appropriate exercise as a method of developing some of the inputs that will inform or help shape our conversations about a planning document, right? This isn't stickers on a board don't create a comprehensive plan adjustment. Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of high-level comments, overarching sort of view. Anecdotally, I attended a lot of events, and because I'm fortunate to have that ability in my schedule, and my fellow council members don't all have as much of that flexibility. So I took it upon myself to maybe do a little bit more. So I just anecdotally say that what I'm seeing here does seem to reflect a lot of what I heard, and as much as there's conflict in this, I will say that I was impressed by our residents and the seriousness with which they participated, the passion that they brought to the conversation. And yes, there's conflict, and I don't want to give up parking, or I don't want to have trees cut down or whatever. It didn't prevent the discussions from moving forward. People it was really impressive to watch the tables work and hear the discussions and people listening to each other. So I think that it bodes well moving forward, that we're going to have some difficult decisions, but we're bringing everyone along with us, and I expect there'll be continued engagement, and I'm impressed with the level of engagement, because it was a concern I had early on, was whether or not we were going to get enough engagement. I wish we had more. I don't know that we could ever say we've had enough, but this seems to be as much as maybe we could have hoped for. So thank you, and a special thanks to our staff as well, because I know that they helped make a lot of this possible. So
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I completely agree on the engagement. It's really heartening to see the volume that we've gotten, and this is, one of those few situations in life where some is good, more must be better, and they give me more, give me more engagement, more feedback. In terms of what we're seeing in the engagement themes, I don't think anybody's really surprised. I mean, these are things we've been hearing from the community in various ways, shapes, and forms for a long time. People who are interested in bicycling or in more green spaces or in more inclusivity, and whatever form that might take. The real challenge, I think, is going to be understanding not just the overall volume of the input we're getting, but the volume that drops into each of these different buckets. Because at the end of the day, it's all about prioritizing, and it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game when it comes to things that are in conflict. Yes, there are many, many conflicts, and at some point, something's going to win a little more than it loses, but it doesn't have to be all of one thing and none of another. Martin was right earlier. Once you get down to 15,000, 10,000 feet, things start to get clearer and trickier.
So we find the and solutions.
Yeah. Yes. Always the search for the and.
I'll say that to keep this not so long, right? Because we're in executive session now, quite an agenda. We do have a lot of supporting data that is organized for you all underneath each of these themes, which polls, especially survey, like what percentage of respondents indicated that housing is a top priority. So happy to share that as we move forward in the process.
Thank you. Bruce? Danny, do you have anything? I've already.
I mean, I would just add, it has been impressive how many people, I'm more of a person who views stuff online, Facebook, social media and stuff, and I've seen a lot of people talking about the Guiding DG program, posting about it, and how they have appreciated it and being a part of the input. And then the only other thing that I was going to ask a question on is, on one of your slides, it showed that 60% were under 18. Can you explain the importance of getting that feedback?
Yes. So first of all, in person, because we noted one of the goals that I heard you all in our first meeting state is that you'd like to see input as it's represented in your breakdown of population. And so knowing that you have a large youth population and we were not getting them to participate in surveys, we knew that we had to recalibrate a little bit. And so they maybe over-indexed a bit in some of the pop-ups, but we were targeting youth, families, and so that's where you see a larger share of under 18 participate here. And it's important because this is why we are planning, right? For that generation, we're starting to plant the seeds of connecting them back to their community. I talked to a lot of high schoolers today who are like, this is awesome. They had no idea what the village does, that you all are behind this planning initiative. They care about their future. Many are very invested in climate change and sustainability, and we heard that come through today. Also, engaging youth brings in parents. So at our table today, we had candy, we had a spin wheel, kids beeline for our table, and who accompanied them? Their parents, many who had still not yet heard about Guiding DG. So we were able to bring them into the process through their kids and candy. This is always a sure bet.
Just to add on to that real quick, one of the things that I love hearing throughout the community, and I've heard, I don't know, just countless times, is how many young folks have come back to Downers Grove after having gone to college or graduate school or moved elsewhere and for whatever reason come back, and how many talk about wanting to come back. I mean, with apologies to my native Saginaw, I couldn't wait to get out, and there's a reason I'm here, and I think that's an energy that we want to capture. So I think it's getting the youth participation is a very, very good thing.
Yeah, so just a couple things. So on this, I think that's interesting that we were able to get more youth involvement and families. I don't think it translated to more surveys, at least in terms of,
I think the pop-ups did, right? Because we were spreading the word. A lot of people, I would say, like the survey takes a good 15 minutes,
Yeah.
right, to thoughtfully
Sure.
finish.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pop-ups and that outreach was tailored for quick hits.
Yeah.
It was here, the project's going on. Please take a postcard, see surveys. We would see a little bit of a boost in surveys after those pop-up events, but it was not directly a one-to-one. And not everyone is going to sit down and take a 15-minute survey.
Yeah, so, and I think this is where it's really important and where we rely on you, because, you know, we look at the survey, which is sort of where I was going with my weight question. We know that over-index is older. And in fact, this council sort of made a comment early on that we'd like to see more of that. You reacted and responded, I should say, not reacted, you responded to that in this method. So I think it's important for us as a council and as a community to understand that process, or at least trust that process more, because I think it's easy to say, well, we have surveys of a bunch of people over 55, over 60 who have been here for a long time, and so that's going to skew a certain way potentially, and then we have these pop-ups, and so I think it's important that we understand that maybe a little more.
Yeah.
Just in terms of your, you know, you don't need to get into your full methodology, but just so that we as a council, or I'll speak for myself, but I think it's important that we feel, I believe this, but I think it would be important for us to know that we are getting a cross-section, right? That we are getting a sense of what the community is, whether it's 2,000 surveys or 600 or 500 pop-up, you know, we're not gonna get everybody, we understand that, but just that it is a good cross-section of the community. So it sounds like you have the data, and I appreciate your summaries tonight. I think it might help build a little more confidence in, because as my colleagues are, you know, importantly saying, we have a lot of decisions that we need to make, and some of those decisions are going to be counter to some of the things we've heard, or they may support things that we've heard, and I think it just helps give us and the community more confidence in that. So
Definitely.
I have no doubt it's there.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe, it, you know, when I see numbers of the survey being older, and I feel like I think we need a little more of the behind this, you know, the black box a little bit to be clear with that.
You have that. I'm happy to share that with
Okay.
you. What I'll say is, of course, the survey is a beautiful quantitative tool because there's more demographic information than I think a lot of people would feel comfortable sharing at a pop-up and on a board.
Yep.
At our second pop-up, we determined, you know what, we know that we need more youth voices, and we want to be able to quantify that a bit. So while it's not perfect, we did have people indicate their age range. So what we have done is that, okay, in this pop-up, here was the age range, right? And the participants, here are the top themes that came to the top based on what we heard, and so we can provide you with all of that. So in a sense, it is more quantitative than just like, hey, this is a great theme. We heard a lot of people say that they want more poppers.
Exactly. Because I think that gets to the point that's sort of being made about the 50,000, you know, foot view that these themes are, and I agree that that's what they are. However, at some point we need to set the compass, right? At some point we need to take the themes that we're hearing from the community and the themes that we as a council think are important and make sure that we are hearing that. And that's obviously, I understand the concept. I mean, I think we're all using the example of bike lanes versus trees as a sort of conflicting idea. So I'm not saying that those aren't going to be there, but I do think at some point, you know, Martin mentioned the downtown was a theme, and a vibrant downtown was a theme, and look what that, you know, fostered. I mean, that couldn't have been any better or more successful, in my opinion, anyhow. So I think it is important that we do agree on the themes and use them as you also said, Martin, sort of as a vision or a mission statement in order to direct sort of when things do get a little sticky, what we understand the community to want.
Anyone else? So next steps as it relates to this. We're still engagement going on, right?
Yes. I think Stan was going to speak to Stan.
Yep.
There
So
you are. Sorry, right here in front of me. I was looking over you.
Right here.
It's bright lights.
The one guy that wasn't talking up there. So right now, thanks to Marisa for giving this great overview on themes and engagement updates right now. So we're taking this, the House of Levine team has got this to work on the visioning statements here. The bike and ped, we're gonna have Aaron come up in a couple minutes to talk about that. We're working on downtown Fairview streetscapes, environmental sustainability. So you can see there's a lot more with these village council meetings, and the orange dots, the yellow dots are boards and commissions. There's a lot more opportunity for people to come to meetings to talk about this. And we had a community workshop last week that Aaron will talk about for the bike and ped plan. So there may be more additional opportunities that way as well for people to participate. And we'll definitely put that out into the public through social media and our platforms to get those engagement opportunities out there. So at this point, if there's no other questions about that, I'm gonna switch slideshows so we can have Aaron come up and talk about the bike and ped plan and the activities that we did last week.
While that transition is happening, I just wanted to add that this altogether in communications staff team has been fantastic. We've learned a lot from each other, and it was really seen in this presentation. So thank you to Marisa and everybody all together. It's great.
Okay, it's on my screen. That doesn't help though. Between us, there control.
Maybe just needed a minute.
Are you duplicated or extended?
Yeah, you're probably
So
extended.
it's visual in addition to audio.
We saw what happened to the audio. Let's erase the tape.
Maybe there's a treatment you can take for that, extended or. Pfizer commercial, you can extend or duplicate.
Oh man, somebody hurry up and figure this out before these two guys get going.
So I'll
Unplugging
suggest
the wall, right?
maybe a 5-minute break, Mayor, and that will allow us to double check this new tech and get going.
Sounds good. Want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's, there's no point in, well,
As I was saying, clearly we don't need to.
Yeah, you're definitely extending your screen rather than duplicating it.
Drag it over.
You can drag it over.
Press the NE key.
There you go.
That's the other one.
No.
Sorry. There we go.
all right. What were you saying, Dave?
That our team has it, of course, and we don't need to break it all. Thank you.
So this is Aaron Tooley with Baxter Woodman, who's been here before. So thanks, Aaron, for coming up today.
Thank you, Stan.
Yep.
Mayor, Commissioners, thanks for letting me come before you all and just give you a quick update on what we've been working on with respect to the bicycle and pedestrian plan since we've last spoken, since we had produced the existing conditions memorandum. So since then, we have been, for our scope of services, we've taken a lot of the existing conditions information, started layering it together to start, so we can start making some better informed decisions and assumptions about how do we go forward with this information. So we have been working on several assessments that we will discuss with you, albeit briefly, because I think the main thrust we want to talk about this evening is the results of the policy directives workshop from last week and get your feedback on how we should proceed from there. But so
several of the assessments that we have produced so far are here. We have expanded upon our and provided a comprehensive overview of all of the public engagement related specifically to the Bike Ped Plan, which we call the demand-based assessment. We have also developed an origin destination assessment, which was largely informed again by that public engagement. We've also conducted a barriers to connectivity assessment and a general bicycle and pedestrian gap analysis when it comes to bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We have also prepared an equity-based assessment, which we're not ready to show you just yet because we want to make sure that all of the data that we have in that assessment correlates exactly with the information that's in the comprehensive plan. So that will be forthcoming. And then lastly, for lack of a better term, we are in the process of developing a what's possible assessment, which is basically scanning every thoroughfare and thinking about every type of bicycle and pedestrian facility that we have in our toolbox and trying to figure out what will work, as well as what will pass muster in the eyes and the minds of your community. So that will be that assessment, the what's possible assessment. Hopefully we're going to come up with several alternatives when it comes to key facilities, and then so the public can help us decide how to move forward with that. The policy directives workshop will also, the results of that and additional public engagement related to that will also factor into that what's possible assessment as well. So when it comes to the origin destination analysis, I'll just quickly summarize this map, but most of the destinations that we had identified largely came from all of the public engagement that we have received. So what we're showing here principally are in blue significant employment centers. As again, let me just back up and say that as I know you all remember, this Bike Ped Plan is not just a recreational kind of facilities program. We are very much interested in the utilitarian aspect of multimodal transportation. So making sure that people can get from where they live to where they work is going to be very important. Also, we heard the importance that it was very important for people to be able to get to schools safely, to get to parks safely as well. So schools, parks, commercial centers, particularly grocery stores, were a lot of the key destinations. So what we'll do with this information ultimately, again, it will be another lens through which we evaluate where this network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities needs to be, where it needs to connect, etc. Very importantly, we did identify where most of the grocery stores are within the community as well as immediately outside of the village. And then some of the key origin points that we identified were residential areas that were of higher density than other areas, as well as senior citizens facilities, other folks who may need to really rely on multimodal means of getting around. So let me also say that all of these assessments, it's about a 40-page document or something. That I believe it's posted online now as well, so you can certainly download it if you don't have it already. We also looked at Strava data for pedestrian and bicyclist information as far as the more popular places where people typically will walk and ride bikes. And we did this on a regional kind of basis, looking at the general region of DuPage County and a little bit outside of DuPage. But let me also provide the caveat that Strava data is largely used by recreational enthusiasts, people that like to do long distance cycling, as well as people that are walking for recreational purposes. So
whether or not these facilities are exactly, or whether these analyses are really reflecting all of the user groups remains to be determined. But you can see here, this was one of the more, where we panned out a little bit, showing Downers Grove in dark gray. But you can see the regional network and how there is this kind of swath around Downers Grove where there's kind of a no man's land, where there is a lack of connectivity and accessibility, largely because of your interstate systems, that kind of thing, 355 and so forth. So that is providing somewhat of a barrier to the west. Foot traffic, it's all over the place, but you can definitely see from the regional standpoint, fairly strong connectivity connecting places like Wheaton, Glen Ellen, Lombard up to the north, as well as a little bit of connectivity through to Napersville, down below, or to the south of Downers Grove. But a lot of the larger, you can see where the more popular places where people are walking. Cycling routes, clearly a popular route is Warrenville Road. To some degree Maple, I believe this is 59th here, but you can also see Fairview, Fairmount, Dunham particularly. Not as much north of Ogden as well as would be expected. Likewise with foot traffic, really kind of zooming into the village itself. Interesting how people are, I believe this is Saratoga right here. That's the most popular crossing of Ogden, is that Saratoga we found. So we're trying to understand that a little bit further as far as how do we get across Ogden. And then to what degree does that inform principal north-south corridors, that kind of thing. Barriers to connectivity analysis. The red lines, of course, are all of the heavier trafficked thoroughfares with speed limits greater than or exceeding 35 miles per hour. We have also combined this with accident data at key intersections, as well as some of the key areas where Strava participants cross these various corridors. But so this is starting to, again, give us additional limitations as far as where we might want to stay away from certain key areas. But we have mapped everything as far as from the longest distance between signalized intersections on key thoroughfares to actually the distance to get across key thoroughfares as well, and laid all those out. All of this has informed some of the key kind of policy directives, which we'll describe to you momentarily. Also looked at all of the railroad crossings from a bike ped perspective. Looking at bridges, how they may impede continuity and connectivity, underpasses, overpasses as well. Excuse me. From a bicycle gap analysis, we did look at all of the existing facilities as from bike routes to on-street bike lanes to understand where might there be synergies in providing further connectivity, facility connectivity throughout the community. Again, just ways of trying to connect the dots to make sure to understand what makes sense from a variety of different lenses. So looking at it from an internal kind of standpoint, but also from a regional standpoint, and looking at the key facilities that are outside of the village where people would like to be able to get, like the DuPage County Regional Trail to the south, other regional trails, as well as just the desire to be able to ride your bike to a neighboring municipality. We did, and we have confirmed that we are totally focused on inside the municipal limits here when we give these numbers, but so of this 269 miles of sidewalks within the village limits, we still have about 65, a little bit over 65 miles of sidewalk gaps that we should be addressing to some degree or prioritizing the construction of additional sidewalks to improve pedestrian connectivity. Oops. And this shows some of the red shows the gaps, and of course all of these areas outside of the village have not been included, but so we have a pretty good idea of where the gaps are. So that's, in a nutshell, I know that was quick, a quick overview of some of the assessments that we've been doing. Do you all have any questions right now about those, or shall we keep moving on?
Did you look at anything other than Strava? There's other.
That we were trying to utilize Placer AI as well as another kind of database through which we can understand how people move, but we were unable to get a license for that, unfortunately. So, but Strava is the only one that we've really been able to find that tracks this to any degree.
I use it, so I suggested it early on too. So it's a good resource.
Go back to a couple of slides. Looking at the gap slide, not that.
Right.
Yeah, back one or two more.
Right here?
No. Back. Backwards, yeah. Go back more. One more. One more. There we go. Okay. Oh, there you go. Oh, one more for that. All right. So help define gap.
Help define what is a gap.
So when we've got what's shown on there is a gap between existing facilities.
Yes. Okay, so here, the main facilities that you have within your village are bike routes, which they're really not a regulatory kind of instrument. We're still not completely clear on what constitutes a bike route at this point, but it's a vehicle that we might be able to build off of, so that's what we're thinking. And we've also noted that the bike routes, which in this case are all of the lavender corridors, interestingly, when we've done some mapping and markers exercises with the Downers Grove Bike Club, most of their more popular routes are consistent with the bike routes. So we're still trying to understand what is the value of the whole bike route system and how might we play up on that a little bit further. And importantly, where are those gaps in between bike routes? Because again, they seem to be the more popular routes for cyclists. So what this is showing is where are the gaps in between bike routes, for example, or where are the gaps in between on-street bike lanes. And so from what we're looking at is how might we create greater synergies between these facilities if we're able to connect those. So it's just another, not to say that we're advocating for any of these, but it's another layer of analysis that we need to do.
So it's gaps between bike routes, bike lanes, or places where we put sharrows on the pavement?
Exactly. The sharrows are actually the light pink lines as well. So we've tried to incorporate all of your existing facilities infrastructure and we're looking at how might we utilize that to a greater degree, to where it's more connected.
I guess what I'm going to be probably more interested in, and maybe we should talk more about down the road, is this what's possible report. because I gotta tell you, in all honesty, I look at this and this is gonna sound terrible to anybody that's a biker in the room. I don't hardly care for the purpose of this about our people who are professional bikers, because they're gonna ride. Whether we got a Cheryl on the road or a divided lane, they're gonna ride.
Right.
So when I see gaps, my thought is gaps between getting people who might not otherwise take a different mode of transportation to feel like they want to use it. And that to me is of far more interest than finishing up where we've got green signs in a line.
I think that's, I think we're looking at it the exact same way. So we are not concerned about the power users and how they get through the community, but how can we, and in the workshop presentation, we did have a slide that came from our first chapter, which we haven't submitted yet, but it shows all of the different types of user groups that we are focusing on. There must be 8 or 9 different types, from a person walking her dog to a woman pushing a stroller to e-bikers, e-scooters, golf cart golf cart users to. So how do we accommodate the multiple user groups that compose your community? That's another consideration. Not meaning to deflect from what your point is, though. But again, bike routes is they're one of the few types of infrastructure that you have currently. So we just want to make sure that we're taking full advantage of whatever designation you have at this point. And then how can we build upon that?
Mike?
So maybe another way of thinking of these gaps is maybe to refer to them as potential places where stronger connections could be made.
That's exactly what it is, right?
So, which gets to, what's possible.
Right.
So, yeah. All right.
When I lay this over the one early on where you identified destinations, things like grocery stores, right?
Yeah.
There's awful lot of misses where the existing lavender lines and the big purple dashes don't go anywhere near it.
Right.
That's the gap that I'm interested in.
And as are we. That is the gap we're interested in. You're exactly right. So this is just a way of, how can we improve connectivity utilizing what you already have? But the more significant gap is the expanse between a facility and a destination.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is bicycle specific.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. Correct.
I see that. I was just emphasizing for the sake of other people. Because there's we could also have just a broader, pedestrian gap analysis, right?
Yeah.
And we've done that as well. Or actually, that's one of the last slides. Just as far as from a gaps in the facilities.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Greg?
I'm just wondering, at what point does a gap just become something bigger? I mean, I'm looking all the way from Belmont on the south end of town, straight up Finley to Lacey to connect to something that I didn't even know was there. Is that intended to be one giant dashed line of a bicycle gap, or is that
Right here.
Yeah. I mean, that runs the entire length of town, basically.
It does, and it does, and that's one of the things we are trying to identify, or at least 2 principal north-south corridors, as well as several east-west corridors. But that is one of the longer. Maybe gap isn't the exact right term for that.
It's just an entire lack of infrastructure, right?
Well, and part
But
of that.
and I guess
There, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. But getting a couple of north-south regional sort of paths makes sense. But is that, I guess and this is really grabbing the stick and going down to about 5,000 feet. But does this make sense from a regional connectivity standpoint? Just thinking about some of the other facilities in the map, there's more, I think, going east and west. But I mean, would it make sense to put one up Belmont? Is that really a gap that we should fill?
just jump in here because I think there's maybe some clarity here. I think what those gaps show are that gap. So it looks
Yeah.
long, but there actually are short areas.
Right.
Right.
Well,
that-
shorter. Some of them are still pretty long.
No. Short areas that are designated bike routes. So
Yeah.
that very top one, that purple lavender line that comes down from the
Yeah.
arbor, around the
Over here.
arbor.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
that's
there's
coming all the
nothing
way.
until you get south of Ogden.
Yeah, and
So
then
right,
nothing
that's my
connects to
point.
it.
And I don't think that correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the suggestion is like, that's where we should do it, and there's a gap there. It's just a
Okay, see,
current,
when I read the report, like, I'm looking at
Yes.
it going, we think that there ought to be
No.
something here.
I think this is
I thought it was
literally
just a road and a
connecting
transit
where
point.
things are not connected.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
I don't-
That's
that's how I read
exactly
it
right.
too.
Well, and that's why I asked my question, because I don't consider it a gap unless it's something we think we ought to fill. Right?
Fair enough.
What's
Yeah.
the, you know, because otherwise it's just, you know, a space where there's no bicycle infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it may be that we're just fine with that.
I think part of it, because I know I mentioned in part of the report earlier that having the connections to the Morton Arboretum and then the Forest Preserve was something that folks were interested in. I think that, I took it as, yeah, maybe because we have that gap from like the purple on Grant Street up north, right? And then there's nothing that actually does connect any sort of walkway to the Arboretum. I kind of took it as we're lacking any connection to that place of interest.
Gotcha.
That's my take.
Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. So, no particular order. One thing I heard you say, multimodal. Right, so I think we, and it even made me think, and I don't want to roll a grenade in the room, but it even made me think about, are we calling this a enhanced bike and ped plan, or is this a multimodal plan?
Well, you know, that's a really good question because we still haven't decided the best title for this
Okay.
report. We have several that we were going to propose, but we hadn't. I should have
That's
done
okay.
that
No,
this
because
time, but-
I think partly because I think there is a little bit of a thought of, you know, what the mayor said off the top, I completely agree with, although with all due respect to the bike club, I would like to see them use this as much as anybody else. But I think the bike path or the bike route, it does have a connotation that it's specific to the recreational use. And this multimodal, this idea of how we are going to traverse the village is far more, it's a larger scope or a larger thing. So that's one piece of feedback. I think the other question that I would have is, in the recommendation or in sort of the what's possible, do you anticipate overlap? So you have sort of pedestrian paths and you have, which is sort of a gap analysis in places where people, and then you have the bike path or the bike pathing. You know, how much of that is typically going to be overlapping or multi-use, if you will?
A shared use
Shared use,
facility.
thank you. Yeah.
That is a really good question, and that was something we were trying to drill down on when it came to this policy directives workshop. Because, yeah, we're very interested in if there is an opportunity, and it's very seldom when there are more than one option when it comes to trying to shoehorn these facilities in. But when there is an opportunity for, let's say, a two-way on-street protected bike lane, so two directions, same side of the road potentially protected, would people rather use that or use a two-way shared use facility that would be off the street altogether and be still within the right-of-way, but it might be being shared by other user groups as well? So that was one of the key things we were trying to, because invariably, as we were talking about earlier, it is going to be very hard to find one dedicated north-south route where it's one type of facility, right? So it's probably going to be a combination of a lot of different stuff.
Yeah. If I could just, you know, I think the Strava data is really compelling. I think tonight I understood it more than in the document. In the document, candidly, it was a little easier to see, but just some of that sort of islanding that we have going on with the, I mean, obviously we know the interstates are causing some of that, but that could be an area I would think of effort. And then I think, I think I said this, but I want to reiterate this too. What I am looking for mostly out of this is very similar, if not the same, as to what the mayor said in regards to like the facilities as they're being used now versus providing facilities for people who are afraid to get on different streets, are not yet comfortable with that, have young children, those types of things. So it sounds like we're on that page too, but that's very, very important. I believe very important to this because we want to make sure that it has the intended result of what is possible, and that may obviously draw some more interest and I think more consensus around its importance.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. I also, I mostly agree to what you said, Mayor. But I will say that a lot of that, there is a fair amount of Strava users.
You got it.
Sooner or later,
You got it.
Speak clearly, that are using e-bikes. And they are going on long rides, and they're not your power bike user, right? And there's more and more of them. I've got friends that are doing that, and I tend not to give them as many kudos because they, well, that's, if you've ever used Strava, that's that's a big thing. And it's like, if you're getting an assist going up all these hills, I'm not that excited for you because I had to power up that thing. But anyhow, there are a fair amount of, these different modes of transportation have opened up, more distance and so there are more people interested in being able to go out and go 20, 30, 40 miles. And it's not just the folks that are avid bikers going 20 miles an hour down the street in their skinny tire fast bikes. So.
I got another backup question. Do we know, is there data that, the folks in your industry rely on, not us, that gives us some insight into the usefulness of these various infrastructure elements? So to kind of go on a little longer on what Mike was saying, so there's opportunities now that didn't exist 15 years ago for people to get out and use equipment, right, that's different. But is the person who falls into that category of I'm not a power user, I'm either I feel like I just want to get out, or I'm trying to go to Jewel, or I recognize that I live close enough to ride to work, so maybe I'll start trying to do that kind of mentality. Do any of those people consider signage? I'm just trying, I asked this question because in all candor, I used to ride a lot. I used to ride the Brookfield Zoo route all the time. That was great. Never in 45 years of riding did I care one whit about a green sign that said bike route. Not once. And if I'm sitting in my house and I've got a kid playing a Little League game at Whitlock, I'm going to hop over there. I'm just trying to think about where I can get across Ogden. I don't care what the green signs are. So when we keep talking about infrastructure, do we think those are really sort of valid, useful pieces to the non-power user biker, to these people that we've sort of expressed we're trying to get into the fold? Are those useful tools to them or not?
I don't have any anecdotal evidence to quantify that, what you're asking, but we share a very similar concern in that one of the guiding principles, I don't know if we've shared the 8 guiding principles. Have we talked? Because one of them had to do with focusing on the design of the thoroughfare, and the design would be what dictates the speed limit. rather than a sign, for example. So there is a lot of quantifiable evidence when it comes to how you design a particular corridor, how that impacts the behavior of the person using that particular corridor. Does that answer your question?
Helps, sure.
So, for example, one of the, as we'll get to in a moment, we did ask a question in this policy directives workshop about how do we, if there are not, how did we characterize that again? It was like, if there is not the protected bicycle infrastructure in place on a particular thoroughfare, how can we use other devices like medians, chicanes, other devices to slow traffic down to make it safer for a bicyclist? So we were thinking about, again, beyond signs and beyond protected bicycle infrastructure, can we use other things to create an environment that might be more conducive for cycling? Does that answer your question?
A little bit.
Okay.
I'll offer an anecdotal myself. Like there are times when I'm out running, I will actually. There are other communities that they'll have on-street bike routes that'll connect for me. This path to the next path that I'm going to, and if without that signage, I would get lost sometimes, or at least have to stop and look at my Google map and see where the heck I am. So, so I have used that signage, but I would be interested as well in knowing, like, I mean, just because I did it, maybe I'm the outlier here, right?
No, right. I think it's a really good question about how effective is directional and wayfinding signage. I mean, considering a bike route designation, that's not necessarily a directional or wayfinding kind of sign. But to what degree do people rely on those when they are selecting a thoroughfare? I don't know that, but I'll find out for sure.
Who those people are is the part that was really of most interest to me.
Yeah.
If the people that are or are not, how they're defined is what I'm really interested in.
I mean, I have a hard time believing people are selecting bike routes based on signs. I think it's more, I've rolled down the street, oh, by the way, there's a sign that says this is
where I think I want to go.
Yeah.
Right. I think I know how to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Before we move on, I just had one other question. The avid bikers, so are they, so I know we talked about we want to expand this, but did the current bikers give us insight into where path of least resistance is, where, like, did the streets that they traverse provide us insight into what might be a better street versus another that isn't designated that way?
When we went through those exercises with the bike club, they were defining, and we have it recorded.
Yeah.
Most of that's in the existing conditions memorandum, but why they like particular routes. And then, why they like.
Yeah, I guess the question is then, will you typically look at that information and sort of, again with the weight, but weight that a little more than another factor of the road or as an additional criteria or standard or mark on it? Do you look at those?
I think that's exactly how we are going.
Okay.
That's why we're doing all of these analyses, is just to find what little pieces of information are critical for us to build into the overall formula that we're using to select these.
I mean, they're a different user for sure.
Yeah.
No question. And I too used to ride quite a bit, but they have. I mean, it's got to be length and width, like how straight they can go without interruption and all that. Like those things.
Safe crossings, the volume of traffic, the width of a shoulder.
Yeah. All of that
all that stuff.
is probably an indicator of what might be a good street. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions right now?
Keep going.
Okay, good. Well, thanks again for your input on that. Okay, so just as a quick preface, when we first met, when we were talking about how we were going to move forward with this bike ped plan, and we were talking about, in your mind, what does a pedestrian-first community look like? What does that mean? And then one of the key questions we were asking was, what do you really want to get out of this? To make this, for you to say this was a great plan, what does it have to include? And one of the things that you all said was that it has to include community-driven policies when it comes to how do we address, as a council, how do we address these trade-offs? Is it a bike, an on-street protected bike lane, or does that mean, is that at the price of removing on-street parking, parallel parking? Does that mean we may lose trees? How do we prioritize these kind of decisions when they come up? And you want to make sure that your decisions would be, of course, informed by what the community would be interested in. So that's where we didn't feel like we were going to be able to arrive at these kind of policy directives through the comprehensive plan visioning kind of workshop. We participated in that. It was very valuable. But at the end of that, you have more of a visionary or a vision, for example, where we're trying to identify some hard policies that will guide and direct how we go forward. So we felt that it was key, it was critical that we develop not just one, but it's probably going to be a couple of these different policy workshops so we can lay these things out and get buy-in, et cetera. So what we did was internally we prepared about 25 or so draft policies when it came to bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We passed them to staff, they marked them up, we had some back and forths, but we finally had a series of about, I think it was 16 policy directives that were meant to be considered at the 30,000 foot level. And then we had two that were more at ground level, where people needed to identify the street where they were living and how these various kind of policies would impact their particular street. So it was kind of a two-pronged program. But so we had 18 questions total. We first did this with, we also had this live polling Mentimeter. So after every policy statement, there were five categories from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Okay, so the first time we did it was with the Transportation and Parking Commission last Wednesday. So all 7 commissioners voted, and their results were in red. Then we had the community workshop, which had about 43 people total who took the exact same, or basically the same questions. Because even after the Transportation and Parking Commission, they were recommending that we needed to tweak some of the questions.
Interrupt just for a second.
Yes, sir.
So the community slide here is the result of the one workshop that was last week.
Right.
So I think it's important to preface that there was at least half the people there, probably more, showed up because they were concerned about losing parking on 59th Street. So we had a significant number of folks who had legitimate concern, and in fact, it might be any street in Downers Grove. You could expect maybe a similar sort of conversation. But still, we had a number of people giving input that they came in flying right away down low. And that, I really feel, influenced a lot of their responses, in that they were afraid to give maybe constructive input overall Right, because they were so concerned about their own situation, and if they said, yeah, they were afraid to say, yeah, this might be okay in certain situations. They were afraid maybe to say that and just said, no, I strongly disagree, because they were afraid of how this information might be used relative to their exact situation. So I think it's important to maybe preface that, because these diagrams on the right don't really represent the community yet. And so, more properly labeled, that workshop, right?
Well, I don't think we ever expected to get a statistically, relevant sample of anything,
For sure.
right? I mean, that was said from the outset of this entire process. But sure. Secondly, I mean, that's not unusual to get NIMBY type feedback. I'm sure there are a lot of people that think whether it's where a new doggy daycare went in, or whether it's where this went in or that went in. Well, you wouldn't do that in your own neighborhood. That's the reaction we get from a lot of stuff. Also, the reaction from folks on 59th and Fairmount, which I guess is where a lot of this feedback came from, tracks with what we hear from other neighborhoods when we try to do things like put in sidewalks,
For sure.
bike lanes, and whatever else.
I understand. It's just that without being too critical of how the meeting was conducted, I would just say that I think that it maybe weighed heavier here than what it might have otherwise. And that was my observation in attending the meeting last week. The mayor was there as well. So I don't know if you want to offer comments.
No, I think you mostly got it. You guys are both absolutely spot on. We just need to temper this a little bit with the idea that when you ask kind of academic, somewhat theoretical planning questions to an audience that is a single focused advocacy group, that's what you're going to get. And that's this circling back around. It's a little bit what I was trying to allude to about conflict in general, and part of our job is to take all this as pieces of the input, not the input, and we'll continue to do that. What you're going to see, I mean, it's item 3 on the board is Exhibit A.
I think item 2 is.
We will still have to be doing something
Yes.
down the road. So if we get more of it, if you think there's going to be more, that's probably a good thing, because the more you get, the more relevant it starts to become. But Mike,
I was going to say, I would hope for more. I mean, I have real concerns of strongly disagreeing with safe, connected, and accessible pedestrian facilities for schools.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. But we have real live evidence of that, don't we?
Well, so just anybody looking at this right now is seeing this and going, that's what the community thinks.
Right.
And I'm saying, I don't have enough data now.
Right.
And to base it on the results of that one meeting, that's what the community thinks. And so there's going to be more, and this is going to evolve.
So I'll interject there. I think the staff recognize that too, as well as folks at Baxter and Woodman. And if anybody in the public wants to get a full scope of this, they should read the 3-page analysis that goes with it, because we took a lot of time explaining how it was conducted, who was in the room, et cetera, and how it works. So these slides say community, but we took great steps to make sure we said workshop participants and describe who was in that room. So I think reading, this is a great slideshow to sort of demonstrate it, but the write-up speaks directly to these issues about who we were hearing from and why, under what context.
Thank you.
I think this is an important exercise, and we kind of knew that we weren't going to get to where we needed to go with just one workshop. So, but it's not like we want to abandon this. I think we just need to keep going. Right, exactly. So let us just go through this very quickly, and you can see again how people in the community voted on these things. The first question, I beg your pardon. So the slide presentation, it had a slide that had just the policy directive. Then the next slide add some imagery showing, this is what this looks like. We were trying to use as many Downers Grove specific images as possible, but we did have to go out further into the other cities in the Midwest and whatnot, but just to characterize what we were talking about. So people would have diagrams, plan aerial views. They were able to understand what we were talking about, basically, or visualize what we were talking about. So first directive, there should be striped crosswalks at street intersections with pedestrian facilities. So what we're saying there is that any street intersection that has a sidewalk or some sort of pedestrian facility coming to that intersection, there ought to be a crosswalk right there. So that was kind of one of those that we were thinking that let's lob in an easy one where everybody can agree on that and we can move forward as a whole group. But that didn't.
How'd that work out?
Yeah.
So, but you can see, there was some disagreement. The second one, there should be safe, connected, and accessible pedestrian facilities on streets within 1/2 mile, which is a 10-minute walk, of all schools and parks. And so, again, within a 10-minute walk of any school or park, there ought to be safe, connected, and accessible pedestrian facilities. We're not talking about bike lanes or just sidewalks, basically. Safe, connected, and accessible facilities. So most people agreed with that. Third, pedestrian refuge islands should be considered for crosswalks spanning streets with more than 2 vehicular lanes and for mid-block crossings. So what we're concerned about here is how do we get people across these heavily trafficked 4-lane corridors, several of which, like Ogden, might have additional lanes for turning, et cetera. We're concerned that beyond 2 lanes, people, the perception of being able to get across a 4-lane corridor, they don't think that they can do it. I mean, there's that perception of a lack of safety. So with a pedestrian refuge on any kind of corridor that has more than 2 lanes, so a 4-lane street, there would be a pedestrian refuge in the center of that island. So, that's the center of that street. So that's what we're trying to get at.
Can I ask what is probably a small, silly question?
Yeah.
Did we consider, because I live off of Fairview Avenue, it's a 3-lane road, right? And so there is, to me, a little bit of a distinction between even like a 3 and a 4-lane road. Like I'm actually not that uncomfortable crossing Fairview, but I'm much more uncomfortable crossing 55th Street, for example. So is there any, I was just curious as the rationale behind 2 or, because I do wonder, because I'm very close to the neighborhood who came. I am on the other side of Fairview, but like my daughter goes to the school that's over there. And so it may sound silly, but especially in their minds, the 2 lanes might have meant something different than even just the 3 for Fairmount. And so I just kind of wanted to pose that question, just knowing the context of how this all happened.
So you're asking what's magical about 2 lanes over 3 lanes?
Right, and just the fact that because a lot of the community was from the neighborhood that lives off the 3-lane road, like our minds might see Fairview different than we would say 55th or 63rd.
It's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good questions. I think there were a lot of the more problematic thoroughfares that people need to cross are at least 4 lanes. So we were thinking, okay, well, let's use 2 lanes as a
Yeah.
More than 2 lanes.
More than 2 lanes, exactly, right. So, 4, residential streets should allow parking on at least one side of the street, but not necessarily on both sides of the street. So we're getting at, we understand, hey, it's very important that we have on-street parking, but where's the latitude? Do we have any wiggle room as far as, being able to control or use some of that real estate that is used typically for parking? So you can see how people answered there. 5, streets with parking should have bump outs, or another term is curb extensions at intersections on the side of the street with parking. I can't remember why the TAP didn't add, because we
We had to
tweaked
tweak the question
yeah,
for the
right.
tab, yeah.
So basically what we're trying to do is suggest that with streets that are at least 2 lanes with on-street parking, that at the intersections you can tighten up the distance that somebody has to cross at that point with a curb extension or a bump out. So that's what we were pushing. So we got a lot of people that didn't agree on that strong. To slow traffic speeds on corridors designated for bicycle travel, traffic calming devices and other traffic control measures should be implemented. And we had, again, a variety of examples on what you could use. So, seven, shared use paths can be used in locations where it's not feasible to include protected on-street bicycle facilities. Just trying to understand what's the wiggle room here if we can't do a protected on-street facility. That was largely, people were in support of that.
I mean, largely in support of it because it likely meant that there weren't going to be bike lanes on their street.
Point, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
8, bicycle lanes may consist of one or two-way. A two-way would be considered a cycle track. One or two-way protected on-street facilities. So we're just trying to understand, what do people want? Would they rather have an on-street facility or would they rather have an off-street facility? So the next question was, bicycle lanes may consist of one or two-way off-street protected facilities. So there was more agreement that there may have been more interest in the off-street facilities than on-street. 10, lane widths should be narrowed to accommodate protected on-street bike lanes. Again, how much can we narrow the lane widths in order to create a little bit more room for an on-street facility? 11, consider removing center turning lanes where appropriate to accommodate protected two-way bicycle travel. That met with resounding strongly disagree. Thinking in terms of a corridor like Fairview, for example, but not saying Fairview. 12, in some cases, streets may need to be widened to accommodate protected two-way bicycle facilities. Again, you have the thoroughfare right-of-way, but then you also have the right-of-way itself. There might be wiggle room to push and we got the village shape file showing all the drain inlets to figure out, okay, how could we widen a street a little bit without messing with the drain inlets, because that would be cost prohibitive. So just another trying to figure out where can we gain some real estate here. 13, provide safe and accessible connections to adjacent municipalities and regional trails from internal village bicycle routes and facilities. Most people agreed with that. 14, on corridors designated for increased bicycle travel, the amount of street lighting should be increased. You may have noted in the existing conditions memorandum, half of the bicycle fatalities and wrecks were because it was poorly lit areas. So we're thinking that any place that we're designating for enhanced bicycle trail ought to be better lit places. 15, enhanced pedestrian bicycle linkages and connectivity between train stations and principal employment centers. So most people agreed with that. 16, in order to retrofit protected bicycle facilities into existing street cross sections, are you willing to reduce the amount of on-street parking where parking is underutilized? A lot of strongly disagree. Or Part B, in order to retrofit protected bicycle facilities into existing street cross-sections, are you willing to remove, relocate, and/or replant parkway trees? And that got a lot of resounding. The last two questions had to do with, again, they were more site-specific, or how people prioritize these various kinds of improvements on the street where they live. And so you can see how people prioritize. The four were on-street parking, parkway trees, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and paths. So most people believe that on-street parking was their top priority. Bicycle lanes got 3%. The second question that was more site-specific was, basically it was asking.
So the middle table is
excuse me.
the middle table is the average. So we had people rank from 1 to 4, and so the middle
Okay.
table there is, if it's closer to 1, it was a higher priority for the majority of people. So for the workshop participants, on-street parking was highest priority, bike lanes were lowest priority. But then for the TAP, the parkway trees was the highest priority, and on-street parking was lowest priority. So the closer you are to 1, more of a higher priority.
Right.
Closer to 4, the lower priority. And then to Aaron's point, the last question was about the easements for the sidewalks and trees, which was, we asked them if we had to request an easement to put a sidewalk or a tree on your property in order to provide a bicycle lane, would you be able to provide that, or would you be willing to provide an easement for that? So I think Parkway Trees was both TAP and the community respondents that they would allow it, but only 1/3 of the community would allow an easement for sidewalk, whereas TAP would allow an easement for sidewalk. I think that's the last slide, Aaron.
That's it.
Yep.
So that's what we got out of that workshop. I think in retrospect, the one thing that I would have done differently was, I don't think that Fairmount is on our radar screen for any kind of dedicated facility. But I wasn't prepared to say that night, but I don't think it's on our radar screen. So I think that could have quelled a lot of concern if I had maybe said something to that extent. So then people wouldn't have been maybe as defensive, or they would have been thinking more about the village as a whole. I don't know. So. Sure, of course. So, but what I did mention was that what we will be doing is using this as a means of continuing our what's possible analysis, and have another one of these workshops where we can show them that we've listened and heard what they wanted to see or have, and this is how we've applied it. So getting more down to like a 10,000 foot level.
So, I know I didn't jump up on the board earlier when there was a break. I did take all the notes on paper, so we have that. Boy, there's a lot of information. It's been a long night for a lot of us. But if the council does have any other comments, any dialogue at all that you want us to capture moving forward, Mayor, would be a great time for that. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Go ahead and start with my colleagues. Leslie?
I have a couple just quick questions. One, so the council actually did discuss potentially putting bike lanes on Fairmount and 59th, which is where that came from.
I knew that.
Yeah, so I don't know. But the couple questions that I had were, did we specifically ask about striping, or, it seemed like when I was reading the more thorough part of the report, the concern for me is more of the lack of consistency with how we do stop signs and crosswalks. And so it's not as easy for people. So I just wonder, if in the future maybe we could talk more about consistency in some of those pedestrian crossing areas. and less about just kind of like
It
what.
even came up in some of the conversations. People were confused about what kind of striping were you talking
Yeah.
about, and sort of
Yeah.
it was, and we had a whole
do-
conversation.
And I've actually had a conversation just with staff myself about that, because there have been times when we have put in new stop signs where my husband and I will be driving and he's like, why don't we put a line here? Why isn't there a crosswalk here? And there's just, we do lack a little bit of consistency.
Got that same feedback at Coffee with the Council this past Saturday.
Yeah, so I do wonder if maybe moving forward, we talk a little bit about that, because that detail, I don't know, just seems to be of more interest to a lot of the folks that I talk to than just simply just striping. And then the other question I had though was, did we discuss like the safety impact of, say, the bump outs with folks? Or was it just kind of showing them what it was? Because like, in talking to a lot of folks who do consulting, and it's funny because there's actually one gentleman that lives in that area, close to that area, who does a lot of that work and has talked to me at length about how bump outs are like one of the easiest things you can do to just improve a little bit of safety. And so were they given kind of some of that guidance? Were people given that guidance as well about kind of the safety impacts on some of these measures?
Especially with the bump outs, we gave them at least 3 or 4 really strong rationale for why you would want to, safety being one of shortening the crossing distance. Huge, that's huge.
Okay.
So yeah, we did.
Okay. So we'll just keep doing that, I guess, the more we talk with folks. Thank you.
I might say, I'm interested in conversation about this in another meeting. I mean, case in point, 3% of the participants, on the bike and lane pass, that was one person. They represent 3%. And we're going to have 2 more workshops, you're saying, and that's going to change this data around some, or maybe it won't, but if nothing else, it'll validate then what we have. But to me, I don't have enough here yet to offer too many comments about what I've heard.
I would just, without maybe to influence anything, but I would completely agree with that. That what I'd be worried about is that we would use this as just to help set our trajectory, and I don't think that would be necessarily the right way to go about it.
This goes back to some of the things we talked about with the themes and the conflicts, and we've gotten a bunch of feedback, but we don't know how much fits into what bucket yet. This is one data point, but there's a lot more out there to look at. Yeah.
Aaron, you made a comment, I think earlier, I don't know if I understood it correctly, but you talked about the what's possible. It's still out in process. I guess I had a couple of questions about that. In describing that, you used, I think, the word pass muster. And so what I'm wondering, you kind of alluded to it again here, part of my interest in Baxter and Woodman is what's possible without that tent. And so will we get some of that? I guess I'm deep. We've talked about tonight some of the challenges with data and challenges with meetings and challenges with public input. We know that that is part art and part science, always, what to do with it. And so when we talk about what's possible reports, this subject in particular, we, I think, as a community and as elected leaders for quite some time have struggled with this idea of what does public input mean and what doesn't it mean and where does it drive policy and where doesn't it drive policy. And so I feel a little overly constrained from a planning perspective if the what's possible report is tinted, toned, put context on it by this definition of no offense,
Yeah,
but a Baxter Woodman interpretation of what would pass community muster over the last 90 days of input.
Fair enough.
That's too much constriction in my mind.
And Mayor, if I may, I didn't mean to interrupt you, excuse me.
Go ahead. That's
But,
the point.
So this what's possible analysis will be in a public engagement vacuum other than what we've heard and what we've learned through other public engagement activities, but we want to lay out what we consider to be a practical network, a practical, safe, efficient, accessible, connected, all of those guiding principles that we laid out. When we develop this what's possible network, it'll show everything that's possible. Then we can decide how you want to, for lack of a better term, vet that analysis.
Okay.
I'd like to make sure that vetting happens with this group, not sort of offline in a consultative
Of course.
fashion.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think, the term pass muster and then the next term we heard was what was practical. And certainly that's important. But I think it needs to be visionary and then let us figure out the practical and pass muster side. Right?
Yes.
Well, we're pretty good at being visionary,
Okay,
so.
good.
Yeah,
Because I think some of the concern, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's just, if this is the data that we're sort of using, Mayor, I think this is what you were saying, sort of as our constraints around it, I'm not comfortable with that at all. And it's no disrespect to those folks who came. I appreciate that they showed up and gave their feedback, and they are a part of our community. There's no question. I'm just a little concerned about the color based on the fact that we have already voted on it. And
Right.
that decision is pending on this plan. So I understand the interest and respect the input that was provided. But this plan or this vision is beyond a block or two.
All right, I'm now going to have to counterbalance that because I think we can't. I get what you're saying. This is one input, and I recognize that as well. But it's also not something I think can be discounted. And all of this is happening in a universe where, when given the opportunity to put in dedicated bike lanes, this council has consistently said no, and that includes most of the people that are up here right now. And I think yes, what we're doing is a visionary exercise, but it takes place in certain practical realities. The reality is that the community has said, and the council has said multiple times, hey, we'd rather not give up on-street parking. Hey, we'd rather not give up parkway trees. So what I expect to see is a list of the trade-offs. Hey, if you're willing to give up your parkway trees here or there, or you're willing to give up parking here or there, or expand this, or whatever the toolbox might be in this, here's one potential network, here's another potential network, here's a third potential network, right? And give us a panoply of options that we can then choose to prioritize and implement. I think we have to, yes, we have to be the ones making that decision, but there are certain practical realities that go along with it. I mean, just the next one that comes to mind is you talk about rainwater inlets. I mean, sewers are pretty expensive. These are all things that I think have to go into the calculus, and they are going to affect the size and scope of whatever bicycle network we come up with.
But all due respect, the two bike lane options that came before me, one, yes, I did not vote for. The other, we did, which was Main Street. So we're split on that.
I was thinking Prairie and 59th and Fairmount.
Yeah. Well, 59th and Fairmount, I think we're sort of deferred. It was deferred until we got the plan. But that's not the point. I think, I agree. We're probably just going to agree to disagree on this. I think we need a visionary document, which is something I've been saying for almost 4 years.
Well, and I think the disagreement is over the definition of visionary, right? I don't disagree that it should be visionary, but I think you and I define it differently. And I think my biggest concern is that we not come back with a document that is used to shove down the throats of residents something that they do not want.
No one suggests. I am certainly not
I'm just being blunt. It's
suggesting
10
that.
o'clock at night. So.
Yeah. No one. I don't think anyone's suggesting that. I don't think the I don't think we can provide the public with any sort of guidance or plan or vision without actually having that. We have to see it
Well,
to.
yes,
Yeah,
you're both
You
right.
guys aren't necessarily.
you're- that's
conflict.
No, yeah.
From the other night, just to give you an example that I think how this is tied together, the two of you are tied together, honestly, talking us collectively. But one of the questions that kept coming up, came up 5-6 times from the public as these questions were coming up was, how much would that cost?
Yeah.
Right? Of course, we didn't know, that wasn't the point of the exercise. But Greg, when you mentioned, my network might look like this if I was willing to do this, and this if I was willing to do this, and this if I was doing that. I don't think that is in conflict with something that's visionary.
I completely agree with you.
I think probably we've given Aaron enough sort of additional pressing so that we don't get something that's overly constrained, and we'll still have to make some decisions.
All we're asking for is enough information so that we can make the decisions about what is appropriate. It's the story of where I wanted to put an electric car charger in my garage. I thought that would be a great thing to do because my son has a hybrid car. Wouldn't it be nice if he had a proper electric car charger in the garage? Yeah, let's look into that. And I find out that because the garage is on this side of the house and the panel is way on the other side of the house, that would require tearing up my entire house. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But I didn't know that until somebody showed me the plan. I think all we're saying is we want to make sure that we get the plan, and then we can say, well, okay, that's just not going to work, or we need to modify the plan, or we need to be more creative or even more visionary. That's what gives us the tools and the public something to look at and then figure out, oh, okay, I'm now going to shift my plan, or I'm now going to do something else because now I see what's in front of me, rather than just dealing with it as a conceptual, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have this? Because I bet you if you ask most of those people in the abstract, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have this? Oh, I agree completely. But the minute you say, would it be nice to have that on your street? Absolutely not. And that's where the balance comes in.
And that's where the disconnect starts to develop.
And I think this
But it's
community.
not a, sorry, Dave, it's not a plan we're getting next. It's what's possible.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
that's it. It's not a plan.
No, it's not a plan. I think that's key, and I
Yes.
think that's the
It's
other
what's
thing that people
possible.
can't react to and go, oh my goodness,
Yes.
we're gonna do this.
Yes.
No, I
Let's
just
see what's
needed-
possible.
Someone had to come in and show me what it would take to put in a car charger in my house, and I went, okay, thank you, not doing that, but I had to see that.
So one of the things that I think is great about this whole thing is, one of the questions was, what about the 2013 plan? What was different? We said there wasn't a lot of this engagement. We didn't drive a lot of creativity because we didn't ask these tough questions. We didn't ask what's possible. We didn't have this level of council buy-in. We didn't get out in the community as much as we are now. So just the fact that there are community members now who understand there's a lot of potential trade-offs in putting in retrofit and existing, that's a big win for us. This discussion of what's possible versus a typical approach to a plan is hugely helpful to the staff team and the Baxter Women team are going to put together what's possible. So these discussions, I think, have solidified some of the challenges with decision-making and street by street that have happened before, but they've also challenged us now to really push the limits on what's possible. This is a way more robust dialogue than we had in 13. And from this staff person's perspective, it will drive a better what's possible, and it will drive a better plan.
Yeah.
So I think we're all kind of coming at it from a different standpoint, but was this first workshop perfect? Absolutely not. Can we do it again a little differently in the next two? Tweak it? I don't think we're going to ask the same questions, so will that be, will that do the data? I don't know, but will it help this team? I think so.
And are there more workshops planned? I'm sorry.
I just heard that there might be a couple more, so we'll have to get on that, so.
Great.
So I don't know if that helped or not,
Yeah.
but this, from the staff person who was around in 13 when we did this, this is a way different engagement. I think it's going to lead to a better what's possible, better what's going.
I just want to throw out too, that, at least since I've been, the council with all you, I don't see ever there an attitude of wanting to shove things down people's throats, and we're certainly not going to do that now. But to be clear, not everybody's going to be happy, right? There's going to be some situations where we've got to look at the greater good. So just being completely honest and transparent, right? This is going to be a tough job, I think. You all know about it better than I do, since you have more experience with it. But I'm ready for that work, and I think this process that we're using right now, chance for success. So,
So I just had another question. Does the survey, so we had, I don't know, 500 or so people fill out the survey. Does that help fill in any of these gaps? I know this was specific to policy, so I know the survey was a little different, but I don't know, I guess in terms of trying to shore up the data a little bit more, does that help?
The survey was more, I guess the way we've utilized the survey so far is more to understand where people are trying to get to and how they want, under what conditions would they be more willing to use a pedestrian facility.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Anything else?
So one thing I would like to ask, and we haven't really talked about this completely, but is there value in reducing these questions down to a more of an irreducible level, but then like maybe top 10 questions and do another online community survey where we're again trying to get more people to think about it at the 30,000-foot level rather than their specific street. That would be one way of expanding this.
Yeah, I think staff can work together on that. I think there's a lot of tweaking to these questions. We're going to take everything we heard tonight, and it may be beneficial to get this into chunks that could be understood without a significant amount of facilitation that would allow it to be a survey document.
echoing what Leslie was saying earlier too, I mean, maybe a little more emphasis on the safety aspect of this as well. Because that is a big piece of this for all of us, I believe.
Yeah, that was one of the, if you read the key takeaways from, we went one by one, people in the audience, and one of the key things that was repeated was safety is paramount. And I assured those participants that this council agrees that's driving this.
Yeah. Candidly, are we going to hear anything a whole lot different? Because this reminds me of the lengthy conversation we had years ago about traffic calming. Everyone in the abstract was traffic calming, great idea, I'm in favor of this, I'm in favor of that, until you started talking about their streets. Well, I don't want speed bumps on my street, I don't want narrowing on my street. It's, we've seen this movie.
Put them on Forest. Got it. Chicanes are great, but don't put them on Forest.
No chicanery.
It's bad. Hello, puns though.
I think we got a lot to work. This is exactly what we needed from the council, these kind of candid reactions and conversation. We got a little bit more work, we got a lot more work to do on this, and we're going to keep doing it.
Anybody else got anything they want to add here? We'll get some input. All right. As we are trying to continue to do it, get input, and input is what we're after. Reminding everyone that there's nothing been sorted or settled tonight. In fact, we just really had a moment of check-in on a process that continues. We'd welcome anybody who wants to add some input tonight.
Thanks for sticking with us.
Okay, once again, we live in the Midwest. So with the bump outs on the street, I don't know if anybody has any or has seen some. The bump out, when the snowplow comes, the bump out, you can't get in and then pull out. So when you have a bump up on your street, you could just go in the wintertime on Blackhawk and Westmont, and you will see that they lose a parking spot here and they lose a parking spot there. At the meeting last week, when they had it on Wednesday night, there was somebody that is an avid biker that likes winter and whatnot. And she said there's no point in having any kind of bike path protected if you're not going to shovel. If you're not going to clear it off, they're going to still ride in the street. And you're talking about connectivity so people can walk to work in the industrial area and everything. Just go down Ogden Avenue, turn on Finley, and go into where Amazon is. And they are walking in the middle of Finley because those sidewalks are not shoveled. And they can't go through all that snow. You can see people up and down Ogden Avenue in the wintertime. I'm sure everyone here has seen it. They're walking on Ogden Avenue because the sidewalks are not shoveled. And they're old people, and, so that's one thing that I think you kind of got to look at. And those questions do have to be tweaked. I think maybe explaining, do you want like on 75th where they have a place of safety for somebody? But when you say more than 2 lanes, Main Street has a turn lane. I mean, why would you do something like that? I think it has to be like 90 feet or 100 and something like that. But I really wanted to address the woman that already left. My question is, she said that they didn't have a lot of response from businesses. So I would like to know what the response was from the business before. They said they had staff reach out to the businesses so they could get more. And I'd like to know how the staff reached out to businesses, what businesses they reached out, and what was the response after they reached out to these particular businesses. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Name's Joe Galvin, resident for about 53 years. Been to quite a few meetings lately. I want to thank you guys for what you're doing, and thanks to you guys as well. It's not an easy job, so I appreciate it. I wasn't planning on talking, but I figured I'd come up here anyway. There needs to be additional workshops. There needs to be additional surveys. And there was some skewing going on at the last meeting, and not just from the Fairmount and 59th Street families, but from the DG Bike Club. That's all they saw was bike stuff, and that's cool. I understand that, but you need to have the community, right? And I think that survey sample needs to be bigger. I did 5 years of survey and audit in my previous life, so I understand how questions are worded. And all I ask is from the company is that no multi-part questions, just a single question. Because when you start to infuse so much information into one question, it becomes hard for the person answering the survey and then for interpretation, right? Because then you're trying to figure out where is that person coming from? Well, I don't know. And so there was a little fear and apprehension from some of the residents for both sides, right? So I just want you guys to know that. I also want you guys, and I know you do because you're fiscally responsible and we pay lots of taxes and spend lots of money to live in a great community, and it's worth it. But we have to look at that real cost. And not just fiscal year 27, 28, 29, but down the road when things start to deteriorate, and then we're pumping in millions of dollars to upkeep things that may or may not be used. So I know you're thinking about that, but we are too. And you know, I have friends and family that live in town. I've been here for, like I said, 53 years. When we were doing those surveys, I wasn't, and my wife and our neighbors, and some are here, we weren't looking at it like not in our backyard. No, I don't want to lose trees, all right? This is Downers Grove. Grove, trees, right? So we don't want to lose trees. We don't want to lose green space. But at the same time, you know, we are paying taxes and we do have expectations. But I just want to thank you guys for what you're doing and appreciate your time. Thank you.
I want to thank you too. It's late at night, so I want to keep the specifics for some other time. So I'll talk to some of you about those. But I think big picture, the way this started tonight, the way the whole process started, getting the large public input, the engagement, is going to pay off. One of the specifics I want to get into later is how will it pay off? How will we know when it's actually moving forward versus, oh yeah, they listened to us and then they didn't do it. And I suspect there will be people saying that, and I suspect there will also be people saying, wait a minute, hey, they did listen to me for once, and look at it's changing. And how to build that in, I think, is really what makes this kind of a process be effective. And I think that you started it, and it's a really good thing to start, and now to build it, those next, what's possible steps as iteration. Oh, let's build something, see what we got, and then change it a little bit because we learned something. And anyway, I'm just thrilled to see the overall process that's going, that I think, first of all, is very popular in the business world these days, but also is getting more popular in other places. And I think Downers Grove, by pursuing this, is setting itself up as a leader among municipalities. So, thank you, and I'll get off the platform.
Can we get your name for the record?
Bruce Maybe. I'm a resident. And my name is spelled M-E-B-E-E, in case you think
Well played.
All right. Oh, one more?
I apologize for not being here the entire time, but I have a logistic comment to make in addition to talking about the specifics of the bike and ped stuff. And that is that I would ask you to assess whether the configuration here works. I know it's an adaptation that was brought over from the other arrangement, but when you have a large facility like this, there's a tendency on the part of the council to talk to each other, and that volume drops off accordingly. And those of us who are out here trying to listen, it's not intelligible. I think the recording, at least the part I listened to from the prior meeting, I could hear stuff, and I don't know what adjustments are made, but I would ask whoever is involved with that, and I know this is the first time we've met here this way, so I hope you'll look at whether this works well from a volume standpoint for future reference. As far as the bike and ped plan is concerned, I guess I've got a couple of comments. One, given this idea of multimodal transportation that's arising, one of the things I hope that is examined is the impact that you have now because of these sort of intermediate forms with electrified bicycles and that sort of stuff, and where they go and how fast they can go and that sort of thing, in addition to the people who are going to be bicycling. A second thing in that regard that I hope you take into account is what you anticipate is the number of people who might wind up bicycling and when they bicycle, because my suspicion is that depending on whether you're bicycling with a group or with someone else or alone, which is the way I tend to bicycle, that can have an impact on how safe you feel and where you go and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I've run into, for example, is that when I'm biking on prairie right now, because of the adaptations that have been done to prairie, I've discovered that the bump outs actually can create something of a problem, because when you come to that intersection, now you have to be on guard for the cars and whether they're going to compete with you to get to the intersection. And because of the bump out, you're forced out into the traffic. So that then becomes an issue of whether or not you actually need a bump out at a location where you have a stop sign, because presumably if cars are stopping, then pedestrians have the right of way to cross the street. And I've run into at least one situation already where I was competing with a truck on an uphill portion of prairie, and the guy decided, oh, I can't wait for this bicyclist to get to the intersection. And basically, I felt cut me off. So I hope that becomes a factor, because the more people you have bicycling, the more problem I suspect that's going to create with bump outs and that sort of thing. But as my comments from earlier in the meeting, I hope there will be an expectation that there will be more cycling and pedestrian walking. The last thing I'll say in that regard, I don't know what's going on in other locations around here, but one time in the past I made the foolish mistake of trying to bicycle from here all the way over to the REI store. And it made me realize that not only was Downers Grove not very conducive to cycling, but communities adjacent to us, at least at that point, were not very conducive to cycling either. So if we're thinking about people trying to get to destinations like a shopping mall, either by us here or in Oak Brook or that sort of thing, if it's outside the village of Downers Grove, hopefully what will also happen is that there's coordination that goes on between communities to anticipate, again, this broader objective of facilitating people bicycling safety wherever they want to get into in the general area. Good luck.
Anyone else? Well, as my colleagues have said, thanks for sticking with us tonight. And thanks for your patience on the arrangement and the audio. We will certainly take notes and try and improve. Let's close it up. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all and good night.